P.A.V. 3 letters. That was all it took to send shockwaves through Victorian Britain. Within days, key figures vanished across the Channel to France. Court proceedings slipped behind closed doors. British newspapers fell into an unusual silence, while foreign publications shouted details that England itself would not print. Official records surfaced covered in black ink. Names hidden. Pages missing. Files that should have existed simply didn't. And those 3 letters pointed toward a name powerful enough to terrify the establishment. Prince Albert Victor, grandson of Queen Victoria, second in line to the British throne. What triggered panic at the highest levels of government was not just a scandal. It was the possibility that the prince's name could be connected to it. A male brothel operating in central London, telegraph boys, and a list of elite clients that included men serving the royal household directly. This was not rumor alone. The scandal existed, the records existed, and what happened afterward revealed exactly how far the Victorian elite were willing to go to protect their own. This is the story of the Cleveland Street scandal, the case that exposed a brutal double standard in Victorian justice. Poor boys were imprisoned, aristocrats quietly escaped, and at the center of it all sat a name that made everything infinitely more dangerous. Prince Albert Victor, Eddie, a prince whose connection, real or rumored, triggered a response so aggressive that historians still debate it more than a century later. But before we get to the prince, we need to understand the house itself. Because Cleveland Street, number 19, was not just a scandal. It was a system, and once you understand how that system operated, how it functioned in plain sight for years, you begin to understand why the government reacted so violently the moment those 3 letters appeared. London, 1889. On the surface, Victorian England presented itself as the pinnacle of civilization. An empire stretching across continents. An industrial revolution reshaping the modern world. Moral codes defining proper behavior, propriety, and social order. But beneath that polished image lived a completely different reality. While the elite preached morality and Christian values, they also sustained a shadow economy built around desires the law claimed did not exist. Officially, sex belonged inside marriage, between a man and a woman. Anything outside that was labeled sin, perversion, and crime. Unofficially, reality was far more complicated. Prostitution operated openly in certain districts. Brothels functioned quietly, protected by discretion and influence. And for those with money and connections, there were establishments offering services the law insisted were impossible. Like Cleveland Street, number 19. From the outside, it looked like any respectable townhouse in central London. No sign, no obvious hint. Just another building you could pass 100 times without noticing. Respectable, ordinary, forgettable. But inside, Charles Hammond ran something very specific, very illegal, and very profitable. A male brothel. This was not a crude operation hidden in back alleys. It was tailored for gentlemen, aristocrats, military officers, men of status who required absolute secrecy. Under the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 1885, sexual relations between men were explicitly criminalized. It did not matter if it occurred in private. It did not matter if both parties consented. The law made no distinction. Punishment could mean prison and hard labor. Social consequences could be even worse. Careers destroyed, families disgraced, names permanently ruined. For powerful men, being linked to such activity wasn't just illegal. It was annihilation. Hammond's business model was simple: provide the service, guarantee discretion, charge accordingly. And for years, it worked. Until July 1889, when everything collapsed. The investigation began quietly, almost routinely. A 15-year-old telegraph messenger named Charles Swinskow was found carrying more money than his wages could explain. Authorities suspected theft. He was questioned, pressed, cornered. Eventually, he confessed. He wasn't stealing. He was earning extra money by visiting a house on Cleveland Street. A house where gentlemen paid him for sexual services. The post office passed the information to the Metropolitan Police. What began as a minor inquiry quickly became explosive. Swinskow wasn't alone. Other telegraph boys were involved. Working-class youths, all earning money in the same way. And when police demanded names of clients, the scandal detonated. Lord Arthur Somerset, An equerry to the Prince of Wales. A man serving the royal family directly. The Earl of Euston. A well-connected aristocrat. Military officers. Members of elite clubs. These were not faceless criminals in the shadows. These were pillars of the establishment. And that's where everything changed. Victorian England had law, and then it had law for the wealthy. If poor men were caught in a backstreet raid, the process was swift. Arrest, trial, conviction, prison. But these were lords, men with influence, political power, and access to the highest circles of society. The moment their names entered police files, the system shifted. Protection began. Charles Hammond disappeared. He fled to France before authorities could arrest him. Lord Arthur Somerset was warned, by whom, no one could say with certainty, and quickly followed, leaving British jurisdiction behind. The Earl of Euston denied everything, claiming he had been deceived into visiting the house under false pretenses. His status ensured that many were reluctant to push further. But the injustice became undeniable when you looked at who actually paid the price. The telegraph boys, minors exploited by wealthy adults, were prosecuted. Several were convicted and sent to prison. Let that sink in. The boys were punished. The powerful men escaped. The public noticed. Radical newspapers began asking uncomfortable questions. Why were working-class youths imprisoned while aristocrats faced no consequences? Why were clients allowed to flee instead of being dragged into court? The establishment tried to contain the damage. British newspapers softened their reporting. Names were withheld. Details blurred. But foreign publications were not bound by the same pressures. American and European papers published what Britain would not. Aristocratic names. Government discomfort. Whispers of a cover-up. And then, in the middle of this already explosive situation, 3 letters began appearing in the background. P.A.V. Prince Albert Victor. Not in official headlines. Not in public police summaries. But in private correspondence, journalistic rumors, and foreign reporting. Once a prince entered the conversation, this was no longer just about scandal. It was about the monarchy itself. Prince Albert Victor was born in 1864, the eldest son of the Prince of Wales, later King Edward VII, and the grandson of Queen Victoria. He was second in line to the throne. His future seemed predetermined, but as he grew older, it became clear he struggled. Academically, he fell behind. Tutors found him difficult to teach. He lacked the sharp political instincts expected of a future monarch. Yet outwardly, he appeared perfect. Tall, elegant, impressive in uniform. A strong ceremonial figure. That contrast created vulnerability. He left behind fewer defining achievements, fewer public moments to anchor his reputation. And that made him easier to attach rumors to, fairly or unfairly. When Cleveland Street erupted, his name became entangled. Exactly how remains debated. Some historians argue it was gossip without substance. Others point to connections within the circle. Lord Arthur Somerset, directly involved, served Eddie's father. The networks overlapped. The proximity raised questions. Then came the most troubling detail. Key records were missing, others heavily redacted. Information that should have been preserved appeared in fragments, or not at all. Hearings moved behind closed doors. Editors were pressured. Individuals with influence were quietly warned before charges could land, giving them time to leave the country. British papers remained restrained. Foreign publications reported freely. The contrast was obvious. Everyone in England knew what was being printed abroad. They just couldn't read it at home. That kind of containment creates suspicion. Once people believe a system can make one scandal disappear, they begin to wonder what else it can hide. Shortly after the scandal broke, Prince Albert Victor was sent abroad on an extended tour. Officially, it was diplomatic. Unofficially, it removed him from the storm. He never publicly addressed the rumors. A denial would have amplified the story. Silence allowed it to fade, at least temporarily. Then, in January 1892, he died of pneumonia at just 28 years old. He never had the chance to define himself beyond the narratives projected onto him. He became a blank figure in history, shaped by speculation, fear, and imagination. Was Eddie actually involved with Cleveland Street? Possibly. But the evidence remains thin, largely circumstantial. Most serious historians doubt direct participation. What Cleveland Street undeniably proves is something else. It reveals how the system behaved when the wrong names surfaced. The response was designed to protect those at the top, guilty or not. That's what stayed in the public memory. Not proof of what Eddie did, but proof of what the establishment was willing to do. Lords fled while boys went to prison. Documents disappeared. The press was controlled. Justice applied differently depending on status. Prince Albert Victor became the symbol of that reality. Not because he was proven guilty, but because his name appeared at the worst possible moment, and power reacted instantly. So what do we actually know with certainty? Cleveland Street existed. A male brothel operating in central London, documented in police and court records. Wealthy men used it. Lord Arthur Somerset's involvement is confirmed. The Earl of Euston's name appears in records. Key figures fled to France. Young working-class boys were prosecuted and imprisoned. The legal trail shows that pattern clearly. Prince Albert Victor's name became associated with the scandal. Whether through evidence, rumor, or deliberate whisper campaigns remains debated. But the association itself triggered an extreme reaction. Important documents are missing or redacted in archives. British coverage was restrained. Foreign reporting was more open. Eddie was sent abroad soon after the scandal erupted. And he died before he could reshape his public image. Which leaves the central question, not what Eddie did, but what they did. Because Cleveland Street exposed a world where justice could be negotiated, narratives managed, and truth reshaped by power. That is the real scandal. And that's why, more than a century later, we're still talking about 3 letters. P.A.V. If they were willing to go this far to protect one prince from one scandal, what else did they bury? How many other names disappeared from records? How many documents vanished? How many powerful men were quietly warned before justice could reach them? Cleveland Street was not an exception. It was the moment the system slipped and revealed itself. If this story opened your eyes to how power truly operated in Victorian England, make sure you stay with us. Because this is only one of many secrets history tried to bury. There are more names, more scandals, more truths hidden behind silence and missing files. This is The Hidden Face, where we uncover the stories they hoped you would never hear.